A highly anticipated debate on decriminalising gay sex while upholding the traditional family structure has kicked off in Parliament. Ministers Shanmugam and Masagos Zulkifli say that the time has come to repeal Section 377A, which humiliates and hurts gay people. At the same time, there is strong consensus in society that marriage should only be between a man and a woman, with children raised by them. Now, protecting this definition from legal challenge will uphold related policies. Over 20 MPs rose to speak, many urging for compromise and balance in what are divisive issues. Now, the debate will continue tomorrow.
The definition of marriage and related policies should not be determined by the courts. Instead, future elected governments must have the freedom to amend the legal definition of marriage according to society's consensus. That, Social and Family Development Minister Masagos Zulkifli says is how democracy works. He added that the government won't use its current supermajority in Parliament to tie the hands of future generations and enshrine the definition of marriage in the Constitution.
Ultimately, whether marriage in Singapore will remain as a union between a man and a woman depends on the consensus in society, shaped by the values we all hold. So long as society strongly supports the current definition of marriage, no government will change the definition. If society's support erodes, no amount of legislation or constitutional entrenchment will prevent change. The transmission of social values to the next generation is something Singaporeans practice within their own families and with their loved ones.
Mr. Masagos was speaking during a Parliament debate over a bill to amend the Constitution of Singapore. The proposed addition of Article 156 gives Parliament the power to define marriage. It ensures that policies based on this definition, such as public housing and education, can't be challenged in court for breaching fundamental constitutional liberties. He emphasises that Singaporeans should continue to guard against tribalist views and respect those who hold different opinions.
It's therefore important that certain groups do not push beyond what is acceptable to our society. In most cases, society needs time to adjust to change, especially on issues that can polarize us. We may have different ideals and perspectives, but we are all Singaporeans. We also continue to protect all from scorn and harm. This includes homosexuals who are members of society, our kith, our kin.
The Home Affairs and Law Minister says that it would be an abdication of duty for MPs if they left it to the courts to decide on Section 377A. Shanmugam adds that this would mean that they are prioritising political capital over what's good for Singapore. Repealing the law that criminalises gay sex is also a matter of considering the consequences for the country. For instance, there is a clear legal risk that the law could be struck down.
The courts may strike down Section 377A in the future, and if the courts strike down Section 377A, it will be a binary process. The courts cannot deal with all the legitimate concerns about the consequential effects of the repeal, which many are concerned about.
Mr. Shanmugam adds that it is a matter of considering the consequences for Singapore and who should be responsible for such decisions.
You know what the consequential legal risks are. In fact, this has been talked about in public. What the consequential legal risks are to the heterosexual family, housing, education, other policies, that they could all be at risk. Knowing all these risks and refusing to take a position or be clear in how we will deal with it is avoiding our responsibilities as MPs. Basically passing it on to the courts. It is easier politically, but it is also worse for Singapore and Singaporeans.
He also warns that litigation could change societal norms very quickly if the government and Parliament stands by and does nothing. He notes Parliament is better suited to resolve difficult societal issues. It allows for consultation, discussion, debate and open-ended resolutions.
The court processes are adversarial by nature. Their decisions are binary, zero-sum. You either win or you lose. There is no middle ground, no balancing of competing interests. The courts cannot consider competing social norms and social consequences of their decisions.
Leader of the opposition, Pritam Singh, supports the two bills to amend the Penal Code and the Constitution. The Workers' Party chair also stressed the importance of a society where Singaporeans will not feel marginalised due to their sexual orientation.
Religious Singaporeans are not asked to endorse homosexuality, but instead honour the equality of all Singaporeans in the eyes of the law. That no consenting adults should be regarded as criminals because of what they do in private. Equality and justice, both stars in our flag, are plenty and bountiful. Unlike finite resources, we do not have less of either by extending it to our fellow citizens.
Mr. Singh also lifted the whip on his party to allow his Workers' Party MPs to vote freely. At least two of the party's MPs opposed the repeal of 377A, while another had concerns over the constitutional amendment.
This bill today seeks to exclude the courts from reviewing the constitutionality of laws and policies concerning marriage. Quite apart from the decision being taken today, I'm concerned about what this carve-out means for the future. Will the government, present or future, come up with other areas of life where the courts are to be excluded from reviewing laws and policies for constitutionality?
If 377A is repealed and that moral marker is no longer, will those who do not view LGBTQ+ relationships as being consonant with their own personal values, will such people be cancelled from expressing their view? Will the expression of their views, say as religious views, for example, be considered to be acts of hatred and discrimination?
We need to open up spaces for our people to hold different views at work, in schools, and even within families. By looking beyond our differences and working together on what we have in common, we will build that better society we all aspire towards. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I will vote against the Penal Code Amendment Bill and vote for the Constitutional Amendment Bill.
Opposing views were expressed as well by at least one nominated MP and the Progress Singapore Party.
Many Singaporeans are concerned about the effect such a repeal will have on the institution of marriage. PSP's position is that the definition of marriage should be decided via a national referendum rather than by Parliament. This will allow the many Singaporeans who have expressed concerns to have a say in the matter.
I believe that not repealing the law acts to bolster the achieving of the aims of the government to keep the family formed out of a marriage between a man and a woman as a cornerstone of a social fabric for as long as possible, in the face of the many challenges to such an understanding of the family as the unit that forms the basic structure of society.
For hours, MPs discussed how the government should engage families to promote and safeguard the institution of marriage and how to prevent cancel culture. Ultimately, members called on the empathy of Singaporeans to reach a consensus. They also agree that respectful conversation about symbolic markers should continue independently of the law and criminal penalties.
I believe a spirit of mutual respect and perhaps more important than anything else, compassion, can allow us to find that hopefully safe landing zone where we can protect our families and protect our gay brothers.
In this regard, such parenting support or counselling should also provide for a faith or value-based support if such is available, so that the individuals concerned would choose what suits them best.
In all, more than 20 MPs rose to speak on the bill to repeal Section 377A, with more lined up to air their views when the debate resumes tomorrow. But attempts to strike down this anti-gay sex law began years before it was brought to the House. Lauren Ong tells us more.
A legacy of the British colonial rule since 1938, the law that criminalizes sex between men only saw its first contest many decades later. In 2007, then-nominated MP Siew Kum Hong filed a citizens' petition in an attempt to repeal it. 14 MPs rose to speak over 2 days, but Section 377A remained. The government said society was not yet ready, but it added that the law will not be proactively enforced. 2 years later, the first event supporting the LGBTQ community was held, the repeal a key focus of the Pink Dot movement. Over the next decade, a series of legal challenges were mounted to declare Section 377A unconstitutional. All were unsuccessful. During his National Day rally speech this year, Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong announced the law will be repealed. Last month, bills relating to the repeal were introduced.